jump on it. So we are recording this meeting because we do have some folks who are members of COGNA who may not have known that they were members of COGNA who could not attend. So we are recording the meeting for them and for some others throughout the country who may not be able to attend their region's meeting either. So we're trying to get the word out as best as we can. And Glenn is joining us, USBGN staff.
I'm hearing a clicking sound or something in the background. Anything else?
Do you hear it now?
No, it stopped.
Okay. I wonder if it's someone's mouse
Keyboard or something.
or keyboard.
That's okay. We're going to mute everybody except whoever's speaking shortly.
It is funny how those things get picked up. I've been on a weekly meeting with a guy who sits in a rocking chair and it squeaks back and forth and it disrupts the meeting all the time. But probably doesn't even realize he's doing it.
Yeah, there's a group I meet with weekly, and someone, there's always rustling of paper behind them, and we know who it is now, so we just mute them.
Well, if my dogs start barking, I'll mute myself. Because I can't mute them.
No. All right. Well, I think, Christine, what do you think?
Yep.
Wait another minute.
Yep. And we can just monitor any latecomers
Okay.
from here and just go ahead and start. I've got it
Sure.
recording.
Excellent. My name is Cassandra Farrell. I am the member of the Virginia Board on Geographic Names. I serve on this board along with the Virginia State Archivist, Kathleen Jordan, who was supposed to join us this morning, but other duties may have called her away because that is a big job. So our board consists of only 2 people, and we receive requests for name proposals or name changes from the United States Board on Geographic Names. The email comes from Matt or Jenny, and then we do our investigative work, contact folks at the local level, and they get back to them with our opinions. And we do have some, I think we have one name that's going to be decided upon next month. The USBGN is going to make a decision. And then we have another that is currently being processed in Virginia Beach. And what's exciting about that one is that the city managers and the board of supervisor who oversees the area where the name proposal's been named have called for a public hearing on it. And so we were very excited about that because that doesn't always happen. So once they've done that, then we can make a decision. But I work at the Library of Virginia as a senior map archivist, and I have been here for almost 20 years. And I've been working on the Virginia Board on Geographic Names since 2005. So that's a long time. And so what we wanted to do today is just to give you a very brief history of what COGNA is, Council of Geographic Names Authorities, how we can help you, what's going on in the world of names, and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. When we get to that point, I'm just going to call on your name as I see you on my screen. And if you could tell us about your state board, tell us which state you're representing. If there's any issues going on you need to discuss, that might be a good time to do it. And also let us know how your board is organized. And then we're going to give Glenn and Jenny a chance to talk. And then Mike Tischler is going to be coming in to talk about the U.S. Offensive Names Task Force. And you will have a chance to ask questions. And then we'll be wrapping up. And I'm going to say this now, and we'll say it after the meeting. We are planning to host a meeting in Maryland in the fall. Right, Jen? In the fall. So it's in Maryland. The place and the dates are to be determined. And it looks like it's going to be after Labor Day. So in September or October. Okay. So hopefully we won't have any major hurricanes to affect that. So anyway, any questions? If you have any questions, you guys know about the reactions and where you can click on to raise your hand. That would be awesome if you have any questions or comments to use that option. So, okay, well, COGNA, in case you did not know what COGNA is the Council of Geographic Names Authorities, and it's an association of state and federal government agencies. And we represent the official and recognized geographic names authorities in the United States, and we work together to promote national standardization of names for geographic features for official use throughout the country. And COGNA itself was established to provide a dependable planning and training mechanism through its annual conferences and now through web meetings to help our members carry out their work and to provide a central place where we can communicate and talk about what's going on. And in the past, the principal business of COGNA has been conducted at annual conferences, attended by members and other interested parties. I think the first conference was held in 1977, and the conferences have been held around the country. Christine hosted one in Reno, Nevada. I hosted one in Richmond. Jen's hosting one in Maryland. We've also met in Oregon and in Washington State. So we do try to meet around the country to discuss stuff. And if you have not had a chance to attend any of the meetings, I would encourage you to do so because they're a lot of fun. And at the meetings, you do have a chance to watch the USBGN in action, making decisions. You can watch them as they meet, as they talk, and then you can agree or disagree with what's going on from your chair. Because you may or may not agree with them, but you get to watch them. And at these conferences, we also have a chance to discuss issues. We have what is called a state and federal roundtable, where we request questions from you, and then we present them to the group for feds and state members to hash it out. And that session, those sessions tend to be interesting. Because sometimes people get passionate about their questions and the answers that they get. You also have a lot of time to fraternize. You have a chance to talk, and oftentimes the best work gets done where you're meeting at the bar or you're out to dinner with people. You get to hash out and you get to find solutions to problems that you might be having. So with everything that's occurred in the last couple of years, we've decided to try to meet remotely because we realize a lot of people are not able to get permission from their state agencies and state governments to attend meetings out of state. So our goal is to begin hosting more of these. And we would encourage you to attend the in-person meeting. But if you cannot, we would rather meet with you online through this medium than not meet with you at all. And so that's why we're hosting our first meeting for the East Regional section. And it's also in part to discuss some changes that are taking place, especially with the offensive word squaw, which the feds, Mike Tischler is going to tell us a bit more about in a few more minutes. So Christine, did you want to say anything before we start the state introductions?
Well, I will just say hello to everyone. Thank you for joining this meeting. Sandy, you did a great job with that wonderful intro of what COGNA is. I'm not sure if all of you were actually familiar. Some of you might have been to meetings in the past. I started attending COGNA meetings beginning in 2015, just because I wanted to go to a geography conference and found it, and then realized once I got there, the executive secretary up until this year was Wayne Furr out of Oklahoma. And he met me at the door of the conference and said, well, finally Nevada showed up. And I was like, oh, we're supposed to be here. Okay. And that's when I learned. And I've been going ever since, and am such an advocate for the organization as a whole. Like Sandy said, it's a place where you can hash out issues, or, even just connecting with your border states for issues that, might be, transcending a border, or certainly is the case with tribal things, where tribes are on both sides of our line here in California versus Nevada, things like this, where we want to kind of expand those conversations. Connecting through COGNA is a great way to do that. And we're seeing more of these actions happening through the use of this organization. So we're excited about it. And Wayne had been the executive secretary, I believe, since like 1985, and just recently stepped down, and I inherited it. And I'm going to do my best to keep it going and grow it. And I think just this meeting itself is kind of an example of that idea of trying to get more states involved in participating and doing this. So Sandy is a great example of that, reaching out from Virginia saying, I'll help, I'll lead the East Coast. And we have Chris Barnett's meeting tomorrow for the central time zones. So if anybody that couldn't come today wants to go tomorrow to the central time zone, email me and let me know. We'll get that link shared for his meeting. Really quick, I'll just show you, if you haven't been on the website in the past, it's cogna50usa.org. Please take a moment at some point in your life in the next few days or weeks. It's just a basic website with some information here, but more importantly is the state Geographic Names Authority file list that will give you every single state and who the contact is. Please check yours, and you'll notice here North Dakota and Ohio have TBD. We've been working, that's what we did. We spent all of January hunting down North Dakota and Ohio, and actually part of that involved and actually both now involve their governor's office trying to kind of firm up some details there so that both their states have that. So please check your state, make sure that the information is right. Somehow people's home addresses are here. If that's not what we want on there, we need to remove that. So check your information for your state and just let me know. You can find me through Nevada and also listed as the executive secretary. So this is mostly what I wanted to point out for you. And from there, mostly just thank you for being here. Welcome. And I just was pointing out Ohio, and here Donovan Powers is joining us today as well. So that's exciting to see our work come full circle so that we can find the right people and connect them to this organization. So thank you, Sandy, for letting me get a chance to introduce myself. And yeah, please, all of you, let me know if I can help from here.
Okay, then we are going to go ahead and start the state reports. We're going to do the Zoom roundtable. So I'm going to talk to the person next to me in line, and that's going to be David, followed by Vin. So David first and then Vin. And I will have to say that there were a few folks who could not join us. Pennsylvania could not join us. Vermont could not join us, but they did report that they have 6 names being processed right now, and they all are in regard to creeks. And West Virginia could not join us. However, West Virginia wanted to point out that they do have a West Virginia Gazetteer online for folks to use. So I thought, well, that's helpful information to know. So, all right, David, it's your turn. Tell us what state you represent, briefly update us, and let us know if there's any, how your board is organized and if you have any issues.
All right, I'm assuming I'm the only David on the call because I've been on calls where there's been 3 or 4 and not sure which one they're calling out. But in any regard, I'm David Wunsch. I'm the director and state geologist in Delaware and direct the Delaware Geological Survey. One of my employees, Sandy Schenk, who has been the representative to this board for a long time, several decades. Sandy recently retired, so kind of by default, I am picking up this seat, I guess, on the board. Our board has not been active, according to Sandy, for about 10 years. So we are a very small state, and we've not had any changes or any direct attention to any requests for name changes, etc. I looked on the recent Department of Interior map that showed some of the problem sites, and I did not see any listed for Delaware. So, but nonetheless, we are certainly willing to be engaged here and learn what we can and participate as we can. So that's about all I can report at this time. I'm still trying to catch up. We do have a new person in our Department of State Planning, and I intend to contact them and reach out a little bit and make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page as far as what's going on in our state.
Thank you. Mr. Vin Flood of Rhode Island, I think. Mr. Vin Flood, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm still not used to Zooms. This is Finn Flood from the state of Rhode Island Department of Administration, and I'm covering for Meredith Brady. I didn't know that we had a board, so this is all brand new to me. But thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. We're glad you're here. All right, now Brad Utter, followed by Stephen Hodge.
Okay, good morning. My name is Brad Utter. I'm a senior historian and curator here at the New York State Museum. We had a shake-up or change of the committee, and now our committee is the director of the museum, the state archivist, and the state librarian. We're all in the same building, the state library, state archives, and the state museum. And I am technically the administrator of the committee at this point. I was going to say we had a relatively quiet year, but it may not seem quiet to some of you. We had 8 proposals that we dealt with. One that turned out to be challenging was a request to rename Squaw Island to Skino Island. And we've done another Squaw Island in the past that was not controversial because everyone was on board. But this time, the biggest internal debate was that the proposed name doesn't reflect the folklore of the island. It kind of changes, it moves away from the story of how the name came to be. And but everyone agreed that it needed a new name, just something that some people wanted, one that reflected the original folklore. But it's a state-owned island. The other part of the challenge was that the local support was not very good, or they were not very expressive of their support, we'll say, for the new name. Most people agreed that it needed to change. And because it was a state-owned island, or it is a state-owned island, the committee went with the name change because of state-level support. The state agency that operates the island supported it. Native Americans wanted the change. So the committee, even though we debated, asking for a different suggestion, we went with the state agencies that supported it. So that was our big challenge for the year. Otherwise, it's been relatively quiet with easy changes.
Thank you, Brad. And once again, thank you for the information on your website. We really appreciate it in Virginia.
Oh, you're welcome. And I should add that I am one of the people that can't travel out of state. So I apologize for that. New York State employees, we can't travel out. Even if we're presenting at a conference, we can't get, we have to go on our own dime, or we can't go as a representative.
Well, I'm glad we're able to begin to change that through providing a web presence.
Yes, this is great.
Awesome. Mr. Stephen Hodge, followed by Margaret Thomas.
I'm Stephen Hodge. I'm at Florida State University, and I'm the director of something called the Institute of Science and Public Affairs. along with something called the Florida Resources Environmental Analysis Center. So I've been at the university for 36 years, and our group the names committee has been at my institution here since the beginning, since the 70s. So two of my previous bosses were the directors of our group. So, and I inherited this position about 10 years ago. We have no budget, as probably a lot of you have to do this work. We don't do a lot. My recollection is anywhere from 2 to 5 names a year, and I can't, in the 10 years I've been doing this, I can only recall 1 or 2 that have been anywhere what I would call controversial. So it's pretty low key operation. I am the names authority for Florida. I have the responsibility of contacting state agencies that may be affected by a change. Since doing GIS and mapping computer work for as long as I have in Florida, I'm well aware of all the agencies and have contacts in most of them, are water management districts, and throughout the state I have a pretty good list of people that I rely on to help with any issues that come up. But so much of it is on state lands and or federal lands for that matter, and they get handled pretty simply. There's not a lot of people that are affected by it. The board, or the U.S. board, does a lot of the legwork as far as contacting our counties and city governments that might be affected if there's something that's within a smaller geographic region. And I rely, heavily on the responses from local groups. Well, if a county government has no objection to something, and a state agency has no objection to something, we're again, being just a single person here, a lot of that just slides through as no problem. But if there's any question, we've had a situation, I think it was about 2 years ago maybe, where a proposed name included the word swamp, and it was really close to or part of the lineage effect, or crossed over some private property. And I was made contact with the private owners and said, this is coming through, and what do you think? And of course they weren't real happy about that, having the word swamp associated with land near their property. But that was probably the only objection that I ever have put in for a name, and it actually got overruled. The board, or the name, was eventually accepted, and it was a legitimate name. It described the area well, so it wasn't anything that was a bad strategy. I do contact groups that are affected by this, and again, rely heavily on what the local governments here in Florida have to say about it.
Yeah, and it's frustrating when you don't always get an answer, which I think everyone here has experienced. Definitely. All right, Margaret Thomas, and then followed by Emily Pettit. Is it Pettit? Did I say it correctly? Okay. All right, Margaret.
Hi, everybody. My name is Margaret Thomas. I am Connecticut State Geologist, and I'm also chair of our Geographic Names Authority in Connecticut. And our Names Authority consists of 9 members representing various state agencies, folks with mapping and surveying responsibilities, our state historical society, our state library, a representative from the environmental justice program in our agency, and the Office of the State Archaeologist. So it's quite a variety of concerns and areas of expertise. We also have a vacancy in the Department of Emergency Management representative. And now my dogs are acting up, so I apologize. But basically, our committee considers a handful of names every year. And according to the GNIS search for Connecticut names using the offensive name SQUA, we do have 3 sites, I believe, that come up on the search. But we actually have 4 sites or more because one of our agency, I'm part of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And one of our DEP maintenance facilities uses that name. I've contacted our chief of staff and the director of parks and the other managers that would be involved in changing this name. And our chief of staff agrees we should pursue it and come up with an alternate name and put in an application. So that'll be coming along. But we also noticed that there are various street names involved that use this offensive name. And there may be others as we get more into it. Certainly our state survey, we have a cave that we've described for purposes of outdoor recreation. It's on one of our state park trails. And we need to change the name of that. It's called Squaw Cave. So we have to figure out how to, how to craft a better name for that feature because it's always been called that as far as we know. But our committee, we have a meeting scheduled for next Monday to start to tackle some of these and at least start to discuss the best approach in handling and finding alternate names for these sites. We do have one of our committee members is a member of the Scotticoke tribe, but we are also in touch with our Native American Council that represents a number of Native groups in the state. So that's our approach. And I better mute myself before my dogs start going wild. But anyway, I do want to say that I really appreciate this web meeting because we in Connecticut have very limited travel funds. And it's very hard for us to get supported travel. So I'm happy to be able to meet with you all remotely and discuss these matters. So thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Duly noted, another A and yay for holding web meetings. Emily Pettit, followed by Jen Chadwick Moore.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Pettit. I'm the GIS coordinator for the main office of GIS. We don't have a formal board or group to address name changes. It's just me. I work a lot with Matt and Jenny to review any changes that come through or any requests. Right now, I'm currently working with a main legislative work group to review 13 offensive place names and to try and come up with a strategy for addressing that since there's quite a few to manage for that project. But yeah, otherwise just happy to be here, and similar to some of the others, we have limited travel funds. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have a remote call-in conference and be able to meet with you all.
Thank you for attending. We really appreciate it too, because when we started this, we didn't know how many states would actually want to attend. So Jen, followed by Campbell McNutt.
Good morning. I am Jen Chadwick Moore, and I am the Maryland State Geographic Names Authority. It is just me. And what we developed, I came sort of the representative in around 2017. Before that, we had a representative that was with our state highway department And then we moved it to my office, which is the State Historic Preservation Office for Maryland, which is under the Maryland Department of Planning. The only thing that we have aside from me, I do consult on any names that we get with our the nonprofit group MISGIC, which is the Maryland State Geographic Information Committee, which is representatives of state, private, nonprofit, local government companies. So it's anybody in GIS in Maryland. And so we usually discuss any name proposals to see if there are any issues among other representatives in the state. So even though I have sort of the final say, I do get input from other groups just to make sure that people are aware of the name proposals. Since I took over a few years ago, it has been more active than it was previously, but not too bad. I'd say the biggest controversial one that's sort of in the air right now for us, we don't have any squaw names in Maryland, but we do have Negro Mountain, which is currently have a couple different name proposals in that shares a border. The mountain range is in Pennsylvania and Maryland. So I'm sure that will be coming up to the forefront soon. It has a interesting reason behind the name. Historically, it's been that way since before the Revolutionary War. It was created that way probably before the French and Indian War. But changing it to something else is a whole nother thing that represents the whole reason why the mountain was named that way. So it's a difficult name proposal there. So I'm sure in the next year or two, it will have to be changed, but the locals don't want it changed. So it's trying to come up with something that is going to meet everybody's needs among multiple states. So it's sort of complicated. I mostly work with the BGN, Jenny and Matt, and rely on them heavily for contacting the locals. I do most of the state agency work though, that way of contacting people. Nothing major else to report right now, except that we're trying to plan for a conference in Maryland this year. It'll be in September probably. And I should have more firm details in the next month or so as we find a good place to have it in Maryland. So be on the lookout for more information for this year. If you are interested in attending, it is definitely worthwhile. It's very good in person to see everybody and collaborate with everyone. So if you can, I definitely encourage coming down and seeing the BGN and all the other state representatives, because it's a very good time. And usually there's a toponymic tour as well. So you get to sort of see the area and learn some history and other sort of naming things for that area. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Jen. And I vote for Frederick, Maryland as a site. Campbell McNutt, followed by Edwin Breeden.
Hey, I'm Cam McNutt. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina. How I found out about the BGN in North Carolina is a little bit of a long story, but I'll tell you because I'm not a geographer. I'm a biologist. I'm actually a Clean Water Act administrator in North Carolina. So I have a lot to do with permitting, water quality assessment. And through that, I have a database with all of the names of the streams in the state on it, and they are not the same as what's in the GNIS. And that is because we use that database for permitting because our names are in state law. And whatever the permittee writes on the creek that they're discharging to is what went into our databases. So of the 12,000 or so names in the GNIS in North Carolina for streams, creeks, and rivers, we got about 5,000 of them that are different. So that's always caused a little bit of friction. And the other thing that we do is when I found out there was a board of geographic names, I was like, well, that's curious because me and this other guy in DEQ, we just name streams whenever we need to. So when he retired about 15 years ago, after 52 years, I named a stream after him and put it in our database. Nice little place out in the middle of North Carolina, undisturbed, Aldridge Wren Creek. And then evidently someone in our GIS infrastructure that I was somewhat familiar with talked to my director and said, you can't just have your people naming streams without going through some sort of a public process. So as my punishment, I was then appointed to the Board of Geographic Names. And that was probably 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I'm not sure. And I'm now the chair of said Board of Geographic Names. And we stay very busy, and that is completely my fault because I also run our ecosystem restoration program. And when we develop these ecosystem restoration plans, one of the first things we do to try to get people engaged is to have them name that unnamed creek that's in that area where they're working. So I got a request for naming a stream literally right when this meeting started, and I get probably 10 a week. And I don't know how many of those end up going to Matt and Jenny, but I'm guessing it's quite a few. It takes people a while to get into the process. Once I talk to them, explain the rules. No, you can't name it after your dad. He's only been dead a year. No, we're not going to do Confederate generals. We're not doing that. That's just going to cause some friction. So I talk people out of a lot of these things. But I'm hoping that a lot of the creek names that go through are happening because of our restoration plans. Now, the way we're organized, we're pretty formal here. We have a charter. We're very active. We sit inside of the state GIS framework with the Geographic Information Coordinating Council. And then the authority that actually makes the decisions on the North Carolina BGN recommendations is the State Mapping Advisory Committee, which is an appointed group that covers a lot of state agencies. There's also private sector folks included there. And then our body itself, there's 7 of us by charter. There's someone from my department, someone from cultural and cultural resources, someone from the Geological Survey, North Carolina Department of Transportation. We have a state, North Carolina DOT basically owns all the roads in North Carolina, was not like everyone else. So they're pretty heavily involved in our names review. And then we have some professional geography professors from the UNC system. And then we also have someone from our local government committee, which also operates through our GIS infrastructure as well. We formally meet quarterly, but we informally meet more often than that when we try to discuss various things like when we have a name change, how do we implement that in the DEQ databases? Because unlike the GNIS, ours are all legal and they have descriptions of a from and a to. So if you change the name of one creek, you got to go back and change the descriptions of all the other ones that go to it. And we've had a couple of embarrassing collisions on that with the Corps of Engineers who were using old data and did not check the one that had been formally changed and the descriptions had not been changed, and it got us in the paper, which no one wants to do that. So we communicate very heavily now these name changes down the line to make sure everyone knows they happen. And then we'll sometimes put out a press release, especially if it has to do with something that may be a little bit edgy, or when we have had discussions about, you know, what is a problematic name, and there's a whole group of people that think it is and a whole other group of people that think it's not, and it's history. So we get that on a regular basis. But I would say if you want to come see a pretty active operation with names, you come down here and hang out with us. And thanks to Matt and Jenny who regularly keep us in line and keep me up to date. And I did find out about COGNA very recently, as in yesterday when I was looking at my calendar and said, oh, that's what they were talking about when they wanted my contact information. So here I am, glad to be here. And I don't know if I can travel or not. So maybe I can drive up to Maryland at some point. Find out later.
Hopefully it will be in Frederick, but I don't have any control over that. Okay, Edwin Breeden, followed by Megan Compton.
Hi, I'm Edwin Breeden. I work for the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. I serve as a staff historian in our State Historic Preservation Office. And my primary job responsibilities are I'm the coordinator for the State Historical Marker Program and co-coordinator for the National Register of Historic Places Program. I've been in this position for about 3 years now and have served as the state naming authority. It's just me for about a year and a half. The role of authority is one that's traditionally been inherited by the people who have this position. So my predecessor served as the naming authority. But as far as a formal board or anything like that goes, it's just me. So I rely a lot on Jenny and Matt for the research that they do, the contacts that they make at the local level. And whenever we receive new proposals, I'll typically, get advice from some of the other staff members here in the preservation office. But apart from that, we don't have a formal board or anything like that. And as far as the amount of requests that we receive, it seems like, at least compared to other states, pretty slow here. I think in the time that I've been serving in the role, we've maybe had 3 names that have come under review. So that's been maybe in the last 2 years or so. That's really been about it. They were for fairly uncontroversial changes that were being requested as well. But like everyone else here pretty much has said, I'm very grateful for the chance to be able to meet in this capacity virtually to learn more about how everyone else's program works and to get a better sense of kind of how we compare. So.
Yes, it is nice, especially when you start meeting with people from the Western states. And then you feel really sorry for people, the representatives from Arizona and Idaho, because they have 74 plus features with the word squaw in them that they're going to have to change. So be thankful you're not one of them. All right, Megan Compton, followed by Donovan Powers.
Hi, good morning. My name is Megan Compton. I'm the State Geographic Information Officer. My office is within our Indiana Office of Technology. The State Board of Geographic Names Authority is me. And in Indiana, we take that pretty seriously because they put it actually in statute that created our position, created this office. So it's there, which was about the extent of what I understood of it when I took this role. I work very closely with Bob Wilkinson, who's in our DNR office and works in the Waters Group. And he and I work closely with Jenny and Matt whenever we have requests. So Bob and I co-chair the committee. The committee is made up of volunteers that have come out of our Indiana Geographic Information Council, which is made up of state agencies, local county government, city government, nonprofits, businesses. So really anybody who's interested can be involved in that committee as a member of the council. And we really don't have that many requests. I think in the time that I've been in this role, we've only had 2. And although Matt just reached out recently and told me we have 1, so I need to go do a little digging. But we then will work with Jenny and Matt, try and understand what's going on at the local area. One of the things that is helpful for our office is we have a lot of great local contacts. So if we're not quite sure where we're looking or who might be interested or who might be considered of any sort of the changes, we have those contacts at city and county government to make a lot of that connection. We have a couple of names now that have the word squaw in them, so we'll be having to take a look at that. Not sure where they're located. So that'll be a good effort. Most of our stuff now, if you guys are familiar with the 3DEP and the NHD project, the way that we redid our hydrography data set based on 3DEP data, it exposed a lot of water that we didn't know was there. So because of that project, we anticipate over the next probably 10 years or so, we'll see a lot more activity when we find waterways that aren't named. But we don't at this time go out and try and find people to name them. We still wait for folks to reach out to us. So that is, we have a nicely published story map that tells people where, or gives people an opportunity to put their request in to name some of those waterways. And then that filters in through DNR, and Bob and I kind of work on that, like I said, along with Jenny and Matt. So we are able to travel. So I've never been to a BGN conference, but we have our state GIS conference in the fall as well. So maybe we'll just work on the different dates and we'll see what happens.
We would certainly encourage you to attend if you can.
Thank you.
It is a good meeting. And it's kind of nice to eat breakfast with people, and it becomes like a family. It's like you're seeing long lost relatives when you attend a COGNA meeting. It really is, right, Christine? Yes. All right. We are down to Donovan Powers. Donovan, you're next. Christine wants to say something briefly after you, and then we're going to get to the rock stars, Jenny Runyon, Matt, and Glenn. So Donovan, it's your floor.
All right, thank you. And hi, Megan. So Donovan Powers, the state GIO for Ohio. We have had some folks kind of leave here recently within Ohio. My predecessor was part of the Ohio Geographic Names Council, and so was Charlie Hickman was our national map liaison from the USGS. Those two folks retired here just a few months ago, and I think a few things were left unattended. So we've got some things to catch up on. You folks found me through my governor's office, so it's a good start. We're heading in the right direction, and we will start picking up any of the slack and making sure we've got these. The state of Ohio's got a Geographic Information Council that we're going to leverage, which does cover state, local government, and has USGS kind of as a liaison to that organization. So we will be running geographic names through that. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for coming. And Christine and I met with Donovan online through Google Meets, and I think this is a good chance to say, if you need to run something by another state authority, we can always set up a meeting through Zoom or Google Meets or something like that if you need to bounce off somebody who understands what you're going through. All right, Christine.
Yeah, so hi, thanks again. And good to see so many of you here. I wanted to point, I'm the one that hunted down Donovan through his governor's office. That's my fault. But we don't like to see TBD in the group, and really from what I'm hearing from so many of the others, either as being the only person who's in your board, and if somebody leaves their job and this information just gets overlooked or something, this can be a problem for anybody coming behind. And so it's really interesting to compare the 1 or 2 name boards of the east side with what's going on in the west. And I just thought I'd pop in here. I'm here as a representative of COGNA, but I'm here also, I serve on the Nevada State Board on Geographic Names. And we have 12 agencies legislatively mandated to serve on our board, including 3 federal agencies. So I represent the University of Nevada Department of Geography. We also have UNLV's Department of Geosciences. We have the State Library and Archives. We have the Intertribal Council, the Nevada Indian Commission, BLM, Park Service, and U.S. Forest Service, as well as a few other agencies like our Historical Society and Department of Transportation, among others. I just think it's an interesting comparison to see the different structures of boards. And with that, and knowing that other states have like completely different structures, if any of you need help, it's a good opportunity to use COGNA, look at that list. If you don't know what to do, we recently enacted in Nevada, even though we have this big board, we found by reading in the super fine print of our bylaws that we had the ability to enact an advisory panel. And we found a great need to do that with the discussion on the offensive place names that's come up recently. And we felt that we needed to bring in more people. So we brought in people that had been part of the original board back when it started in 1985 here in Nevada. We brought in some of those people because they were the historians, the previous archivists, things like this. And then we brought in cultural anthropologists. We brought in people that serve in regional capacities for the West and Forest Service, things like this, just to be able to help to kind of grow the conversation. So maybe your agency might have the fine print that you could enact. In fact, Sandy, this is a good example. Sandy reached out from Virginia to have a meeting with Nevada because we're so different, and from her board. And I think there was a conversation that, well, I know the conversation happened, but it was more the idea that I think that the discussion on the advisory panel was productive, and thinking about how that could maybe be incorporated into a board that might need more help and more support as these kinds of things happen. So that's one way that you could work with a state on not even a shared border thing, but on the other side of the country that might be helpful or provide perspective. The Nevada board, again, has been around since 1985, and we're mandated to exist. And as of our last legislative session, we are now mandated to report annually to our governor as to the actions of our board and provide a status report on how we're dealing with names. We had passed state legislation to remove all the offensive place names, but that was prior to the new federal directives that are coming and are going to be discussed here in a minute. So how our state is trying to pivot to navigate both our state legislation and what we had kind of set in motion, how we're trying to figure out how what we had started is going to be impacted by the new directives and how we're going to navigate that course moving forward with all the agencies and interested parties and affected people in the state. So we had already started conversations and we already had community partners and things like this. So we're waiting to see what some of this conversation is going to result in and how it's going to impact us. So I just thought it would be worth pointing out of how we run things in Nevada and how maybe just, you know, the perspective of a different board might be helpful. So please reach out to us at COGNA or other states and that you find on the list if you think any of us can help. That's what this group is supposed to be for. And we're just really excited to see even people that are new to this, not knowing COGNA was here, didn't know your state had a board. This is the point of this meeting. So I'm excited that you're here. Thanks, Sandy.
No problem. Okay, Michael Tischler has joined us. So Jenny, Matt, Glenn, would you like to introduce yourselves before Mike gives his presentation?
I think Glenn should go first.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, I'm really glad to be here. Glenn Gimple, Executive Secretary for the Domestic Names with the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. Wow, mouthful. So I'm been saying this at the previous regional meetings that COGNA has put together, that I am super excited about this. The fact that this is being reinvigorated and we're reaching out to more states and we're getting some feedback and we're understanding some of the complexities, some of the issues between, you know, some of these groups are robust, very well attended meetings down to a single person. That's incredible. And so I think that sort of exposes the value of COGNA to be able to pull together its expertise, pull together its best practices, and put things together that the whole state names authority community can use. So super excited about this. Another thing I wanted to mention was, you know, the federal government, we're the BGN specifically, we're here to support COGNA. We think it's valuable between the information sharing, the training possibilities, academic research discussions, hearing from the states what your issues are and how COGNA can help. The BGN meetings and the interaction between the federal board and the state boards, and GNIS information and what state information is out there. I love the discussion from North Carolina. I mean, the fact that he considered his position of punishment, which is sad to hear, but I thought it was pretty funny. And the fact that you've got this discrepancy between GNIS and your state streams. I think that is a super interesting discussion I'd like to have with you. Anyway, I'm talking too much here. I think I'm just really glad that we've had this push from Christine to take the executive secretary role for COGNA, and Sandy, Bruce, Mary, who have taken on the regional position roles. I think it's so exciting to see people step up and see the value of COGNA actually coming and being exposed here. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm really glad to meet everyone. So that's all.
I guess I'll go ahead and jump in then. Thanks, Glenn. And as I said, the last two calls as well, it's kind of hard to follow Glenn's. Thanks to all of you for being here. And it's just awesome to quote, meet all of you in person. You know, we've all emailed back and forth for years in many cases and never met each other. And I've been to many of the COGNA conferences, but you've probably got a sense already that there's a lot more activity happening out west. And so it's great to see the eastern states really get involved now too. So again, by way of introduction, my name is Jenny Runyon. As most of you probably know me through email. I work at U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, that's the building behind me there, and research staff for the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. I've been in this role for 27 years, so I feel like I've seen it all, but then again, there's always something new challenges. And as you've probably learned from Sandy and Christine, we like to joke, but it's very true. There's 50 states and 50 ways of doing business. I mean, you really have to know in this job how each one of you operates and how much time, to be honest, you can dedicate to this effort. You've got legislative boards with 12 members who meet, you know, you have sunshine laws, public laws, you can't do business by email. And then there are others of you who simply respond to our request for comment with, looks good to me, or, you know, what do the counties say? If the county's okay, we're okay. So you run the gamut of amount of effort that each state can put into this. And obviously it's part of your budget, part of your state priorities, part of your leadership. And the fact that many of you either didn't know you had a state names authority, didn't know you were a member of COGNA, and that your leadership doesn't even know that you exist. Maybe through these meetings now we can help work together to solve some of that, the disconnect. Because the fact is that people in your state need to know that you are their state names authority and that you represent the state when we at the US BGN ask for your input. And so if nothing else, I guess I'd like to encourage those of you who are a single person, if nothing else, increase awareness within your state, maybe state GIS council, maybe become a subcommittee within your larger geographic community. Just get the word out that you are the names person, because even if you don't have any squaw names in your state, you're going to have other offensive words, no doubt. And in the next coming years, that's going to be a hot topic. And I would not want to be the sole person representing my state on something that could be controversial. So reach out to Christine, to Sandy, to your neighbors, of course, to us. We're all here to work together. As Glenn said, you know, the BGN is thrilled. And as most of you know by now, or should know certainly, that the recommendation of state names authority is critical to the US BGN's decisions. You represent your state, your local communities. So the more you can give us makes our job that much easier and really emphasizes how in touch we are with the people who at the end of the day are going to live with the results of our decisions. You know, we're sitting here in DC and it's easy to feel remote from all this, but you all have the consequences of our decisions. So I guess I'll just wrap up by again saying thanks to everybody for participating. Thanks for Christine to stepping up as Executive Secretary of COGNA. Thanks to Sandy for hosting this session. And for what it's worth, you know, the US BGN has met in person really since its inception in 1890. And up until 2 years ago, we met every month in person at the Department of the Interior, main building in DC. We've been virtual now the last 2 years, and you're all welcome to listen in to any BGN Domestic Names Committee meeting, second Thursday of every month. Just let us know if you're interested, and especially if you have a name on the docket from your state to kind of see it wrap up. We'd love to have you join us. So let us know. So thanks again, everyone.
Hi, I'm Matt. Don't have much else to say than what Glenn and Jenny said, but good to put faces to the voices on the phone or the words on the email. So it's just the staff of two. It's sometimes hard to keep up with you. So I know I sometimes don't follow up as quickly as I can with most of the state authorities, but we're trying to keep up with all the work that we have here. So anyway, good to meet you all.
Thank you, Matt. And from what Jenny said, if anybody can find anything, Matt can. Okay, Miss Mike Tisler.
Thank you, Sandy, and I appreciate both you and Christine helping set this up and the invitation and a chance to talk about derogatory names. I'm the director of the National Geospatial Program at USGS, which includes the Board on Geographic Names actions and Secretariat and all the activities, along with a variety of different things, but that's not really germane today. And it's names is a rather small part of the portfolio that I oversee, but there's no question it's a really important one, and it's very unique and different and challenging, but we definitely take the authoritative nature of maintaining the database and all the actions and dealings with the states very seriously. In particular, these latest actions I'll talk about with derogatory names. I'm particularly excited to be here with the Eastern states. I've been an East Coaster for most of my life. I'm a native of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and been living in Virginia since the mid 2000s, early 2000s. But I, of course, still call Pennsylvania home, and Western Pennsylvania in particular. So I glad to be here and to meet some of you, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in person someday. And I would particularly like to hear from Christine how she ended up with a sarcophagus in her room. But don't often see that, and I've seen a lot of backgrounds over the last 2 years. Can't say I've seen a sarcophagus.
I'll tell you another time. Hey, Mike, do you need to share a PowerPoint?
I do.
Okay, hang on just a second. Should work now. Yep.
Okay. Hopefully you're seeing full screen. Oh, that'll work. You're seeing full screen, I think, right? A lot of activity since November around derogatory names, and actually starting last summer when we received interest from the department that the secretary would like to address some of the derogatory names issues. And in fact, when now Secretary Holland was in the Congress, she introduced legislation called the Reconciliation of Place Names Act that would start to address some of the issues that were later fell under the two secretarial orders that I'll discuss. On November 19th, the Secretary of Interior did sign two secretarial orders, 3404 and 3405. They're quite different in scope. The aperture on 3404 is quite small and focused on just the SQ term and how to reconcile that. And there's a number of activities and actions that were requested under that secretarial order. We'll cover those in a second, but for your information, know that that's different and distinct from 3405, which is looking at other derogatory terms, things that are not necessarily geographic names, and sets up a federal advisory committee as a way for the public to provide feedback to the Department of Interior and advice on how to address derogatory names. Also know that the Department of Interior has been taking actions toward both of these secretarial orders according to the implementation and schedule and guidelines that were in those two secretarial orders. With 3404, the first secretarial order, the first thing it did was declare the SQ term derogatory. That's only the third time that's happened in the history of the Board on Geographic Names. And that's an important step for a variety of reasons, not just the perception, but there's some policies that now we can apply to that term. And it kicked a few other things into action. The secretarial order also created a derogatory geographic names task force, which includes members from across the Department of Interior, as well as the Forest Service being a major land management agency, and asked that USGS chair that task force. And that's my role now. I've been leading that group of 13 people. The makeup of that task force is outlined in the right, and this comes from the secretarial order as well. So in addition to domain experts, the BGN members from the land management agencies, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the BGN Executive Secretariat, there's also 6 representatives that are meant to provide a diverse perspective. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, a representative from DOI's Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights, and also 4 at-large representatives from across the department for people that may not have domain experience, but do have a diverse background or diverse perspective to offer as we go through and reviewing candidate names. The second thing or third, however many, I've lost count of how many things I was on here now, but the secretarial order asked the USGS to create a slate of candidate replace names. The Board on Geographic Names by policy can't unname a feature. So while declaring these SQ terms as derogatory was a first step, we can't remove them without a replacement name. And over the past 20 years or so, we've executed about 260 replacement name changes for this term SQ. There's still 665 out on the landscape. So in order to move forward, a method needed to be determined to provide replacement names if they weren't coming from the public or from states or local governments or whoever. So what was decided was that the USGS would look for, first determine how many of these features were out there, and then for each one, look at the nearest 5 named geographic features. And that would come up for each individual SQ feature, a list of candidate replacement names that the task force could review. The thought being that if you've got a SQ peak that's somewhere out in the west, and the nearest feature to that might be Crystal River, you could take the Crystal part of that name and apply it to the peak. So now you have Crystal Peak as opposed to SQ Peak. And that would take advantage of an association with a nearby topographic feature and a name that was already at least in local use in some way and likely accepted by the local community. There's recognition that this is not meant to be permanent, that we want input from the communities. We want names that communities can be satisfied with and that they understand and live with and see themselves in. But the first step in removing these derogatory features was developing a suite of candidate replace names. And that is really what the task force job is from now and through the spring and into the summer, is to look at the 665 names, look at those candidate replacement names, and determine which one is as objectively as possible, which one is the best replacement name. We'll be taking into account existing proposals. If states or other people had submitted a proposal for an SQ feature before the secretarial order, or actually up until about mid-January, that proposed name will get transferred to the task force. So if we have a name that's already been proposed, that'll get prioritized ahead of those proximity-based candidate replace names. The whole idea of developing that suite or that slate of names was so we had something in lieu of a proposal from the public. So now if we do get one, we'll prioritize that. And that goes for recommended place names that come in through the public comment period or through the tribal consultation. For those of you that might have been paying attention last week, the Department of Interior released 2 Federal Register notices last Wednesday. One was for a public comment period and one was for tribal consultation. This is going to be the main mechanism. We'd like to see feedback or recommendations on those SQ names or the candidate replace names or additional names you might like to have us consider. The public comment period will be open from 60 days. The tribal consultations are for all federally recognized tribes. There will be 3 of those that will happen in, I think, mid to late March. And then there'll be a 30-day written comment period for the tribes to submit additional information or recommendations up until the end of April. Ultimately, the task force is going to take all the information, all the candidate replacement names, any information they get in from the public comment period and tribal consultation, and they will review those lists and conflate all that information and ultimately come up with a one-for-one replacement, one word for each SQ term, to the Board on Geographic Names, hopefully later this summer and fall. What that looks like on a calendar is this. So if you, on the left-hand side, if you start on November 19th, that's when the secretarial order was signed. Appointment letters from the Secretary's office went to the members of the task force in late December. The USGS provided the list of candidate replace names, those 5 names for each SQ feature, in January 24th. And the secretarial order, that action kicked off 2 other clocks, so to speak, for the public comment period and tribal consultation period. And those are those blue boxes you see happening in mid to late February. So as of last Wednesday on the 23rd, I believe, those 2 Federal Register notices and those 2 periods open for public comment and for tribal consultation. All the while, the task force has been reviewing those names and getting familiar with each one, the local topography, the candidate replace names, and understanding what proposals might already have been given. In some cases, doing outreach within their bureaus as necessary, like they would do for a regular or a conventional BGN proposal process. When those periods end on April 24th, the public comment and tribal consultation written period end on April 24th, the task force has 3 months to reconcile all that information, review all that information, and provide a recommendation for all 665 features to the Board on Geographic Names. And then the Board on Geographic Names has 60 days to render a decision from when they receive that list of recommended names. So this is the schedule, a no later than schedule. We'll try to stay ahead of this where possible, but that's about the timeline that we expect to see some of these actions. So the last week was a big day for us, and releasing those public, the Federal Register notices and opening the public comment period. We've had some really good, in terms of volume, really good feedback, and some of which is related to providing names, some of which is just comments about the process, and we certainly welcome all of that. Switching a little bit to 3405, this is a second secretarial order. This creates a federal advisory committee, and for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, that's a very official term that's subject to the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, that governs how the government can formally take an advice from the public. That Federal Advisory Committee will consider additional derogatory terms other than just SQ. It will consider the names of federal land units, things like refuges or national parks or national forests, in addition to just geographic features. And it will also consider the process that we have for reconciling derogatory names. It's going to be co-chaired by the Park Service, led by the Park Service, but co-chaired by the Forest Service. And that really is the mechanism through which you can supply comments or feedback regarding all of these other things. 3404 and the task force is concerned just with SQ. If you have comments about any of the other related derogatory terms, this Federal Advisory Committee is your venue for a forum for getting your voice heard. There was a Federal Register notice that went out, I think, just after Christmas, before the new year, that was seeking nominations to this Federal Advisory Committee. By rule, Federal Advisory Committee meetings have to be open to the public, and you can typically register to have a public comment during the public comment period, and they'll give you a couple of minutes to say a statement if you have one. And if I don't know what schedule they're working on or when they're going to have names announced for the membership of that Federal Advisory Committee. Perhaps some of you can put in your name for consideration, but certainly if you do have an interest in additional derogatory names or the wider scope beyond SQ terms, this is a way you can get engaged. And again, I want to thank you for your participation. You all play a big role. I think the Western states where most of these names occur might play a little bit larger role just by the fact that they have more names, but that doesn't, every name is, as we talk, as I've dubbed it, at least in the BGN, we have the Horton here's a who rule of names. No name is too big or too small. And regardless if your state has one name or 80 names, it's still really important. And we want to make sure that if you have concerns about it or recommendations or questions, that those are answered and that you understand the process and are working with stakeholders as appropriate. Are there any questions I can help answer?
Hey, Mike, you said there's other derogatory names that have been identified in the past. Is that something that has already been taken care of, or is that something that's going to be taken care of in the future after this SQ term is done?
No, they've been taken care of. There were two in the past, both occurred in the 60s. Secretary Udall in 63, 64, so asked the Board on Geographic Names to look into use of the N-word, and blanket replaced all N-word geographic features with Negro. A few years later, the Board on Geographic Names looked at at Jap and replaced all of those terms to Japanese. And that was in 1967, 68. And those it took a little bit longer, you can imagine, in the pre-digital era for all of those map changes to be made, but all of those changes have been made on the landscape for some time. Other questions or comments? Anything I can help address?
Well, maybe one more. So if I understand what you just said is that we don't really have to do anything if we want to accept whatever name is come up with this nearest neighbor kind of rules. It's not like we have to take an initiative and say, what do you want to call this? We can just wait and see what you guys propose and then say yes or no to it.
Not exactly. So in the Federal Register notice that went out last week, there's a link to the candidate names and the SQ names. In this process, the task force is going to have a recommendation to the BGN, and that'll be it. After that happens, though, if you find out that this is what the BGN decided on, it changed SQ Peak to Crystal Peak, and you said, I hate that name, there's no connection, I know there's a stakeholder that has a better name, you can revert back to the conventional BGN process and submit a proposal through the BGN like you normally would before all this started. But the states are not going to have a chance to say yes or no for the task force recommendation to the BGN and their decision.
I was under the impression at first when this came out that it was only federal lands. Am I missing it? Because I just looked at New York and I see there are a bunch here.
Yeah,
know if
it was a function of the title of the press release from the Department of Interior. That title said it's only on federal lands, and that's inaccurate. We've talked to DOI about that. So as you know, geographic names occur on all kinds of land ownership. The GNIS database that we have has names from state land, federal land, public land, private land, tribal land, all sorts of different things. Our scope is for federal usage. So the name changes that we make are for federal map products or other federal products. States can still issue their own maps with their own names. The names, the renaming decisions that we're taking under Secretarial Order 3404 really apply to federal map products. And that's what the GNIS database is. It's the federal authoritative database. So it's more than federal lands, but only applies to federal use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess. So the result is the same though. The name officially changes. Is that unless the state has a different name?
If the state, right. So if you have a New York state map and you don't agree with the term for whatever reason, you can continue to produce your state maps with whatever name you would like for federal state purposes. Ideally, you want to, for consistency purposes, it makes sense to be consistent, I would think, with the federal government. But that's really the scope of our activities. We can't dictate what states put on their own state produced maps. This is really usage for the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. On SO 3405, did I hear you right that you said everything is under consideration, including like names of national parks?
That's right. Good to see you. Not talking about geology, a whole different field. Yeah, it's still derogatory names. I don't think the Park Service wants to open the scope into offensive names, which is a different category. They still want to keep it on derogatory terms, but it is wider than just geographic features to include the names of those federal land units that could be parks or refuges or forests or recreation areas. It could be, I think, even maybe some facilities or other things that are, to the extent they have the authority that the federal government might have on those federal land units, things like facility names or roads or streets. But that's really the wider scope there.
So look out Grand Teton National Forest, huh?
Yeah, it's really anxious to hear the comments from the public and how they feel about that. And I know that's part of the reason the Forest Service has been leaning in so hard and they want to help co-chair this, is I think they recognize they've got some challenges within their own bureau they'd like to address. Margaret?
Hi, Mike. My question is about public notice, I guess. You know, the Federal Register is familiar to many of us, but certainly in Connecticut, where the state I represent, we have 169 towns. They all have their own town government. They all have their own first selectmen, their own local commissions. And I'm just wondering, is that something that we should be doing? Is broadcasting the notice, the Federal Register notice, to let everyone know that these names are out there and being considered?
I'm not going to ask or tell people what's most appropriate for their state. I would just say that we would love to have a robust public comment period and make sure that people that have names in their backyard or in their jurisdiction are aware of it, and that they know how to provide us feedback and get involved in the process that they would like. I will also say specifically with tribes, not only have they been offered the tribal consultation opportunities, we issued tribal letters to the tribal leaders directly using a list that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has. And those were released, I think, the day before the Federal Register notice. So for tribes in your area, if you have any in Connecticut, they should be aware of this through a direct communication from the Department of Interior as well as the Federal Register notice.
But that would just go to the federally recognized tribes, not
right.
necessarily the Native American communities within the state.
Yeah, so if they are not if they're part of a band that is not federally recognized, then they would not have received that letter. But they still are welcome to comment in the public comment period.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I guess if I could jump in real quick there, if you want a model of how one state is doing their public outreach, if you go to the BGN website, follow the link to the state names authorities, those of you that have web pages, there's one for Colorado. And even though Colorado is a relatively newly reformed board, they're taking this very seriously, and they have developed a web page that invites members of the public to provide feedback to the names on the list of features in Colorado that'll be changed. And then once they have their feedback from the communities, they will meet and make recommendations to the task force through the public comment notice. So it's a little convoluted, but I invite you to maybe take a look. When I checked on Friday, the comment link wasn't working yet, but I imagine if not now, very soon. And they are putting out notices to their local governments saying, hey, this is happening. Take a look, go to this website, provide us your feedback, and maybe even provide a different name, because as Mike said, the task force is considering not only the proposals that were already pending before the US BGN to change the SQ name, but if a proposal comes in through this public comment process from a local, an individual, a state agency, a state names authority, that will also go on the list for consideration. So yes, the window is short. It was 60 days as of last week. So if you want to model the Colorado's approach by getting the word out, I'm sure they wouldn't object if you stole some of their guidance. So take a look at the Colorado board if you want an example, again, of one state that is doing a lot of proactive outreach. So maybe that helps.
And Margaret, just looking at the list of names as Jenny was talking, Connecticut just has 3, 2 in Windham County and 1 in New Haven County.
Right, right.
Actually, I was going to ask if you want me to share the screen and show what the document looks like. I put the links in the chat for other folks, but I could share the screen really quick just so you see what the Excel document looks like if you find that useful. And I have on here, and then we have another question I'll read, but I'm finding by scrolling through the list, and you can see like the close geographic features off to the side as they mentioned, but I see Pennsylvania has 3, Massachusetts has 7, 1 in New Hampshire, 1 in North Carolina, 2 in New Jersey, 11 in New York, 3 in Connecticut, 1 in Florida, 7 in Indiana, and 1 in Maine from what I'm seeing. And that was just a quick scroll through. I had it focused on New York just because of the amount here, and you would be able to see there's a map link provided. I've played around on it because of the amount of names for Nevada, but that this can be accessed through the link that I put in the chat. And then we do have one question for you, Mr. Tischler, in the chat, which is, while I agree with the premise of the task at hand, it has a very authoritarian feel to the process. Is there a plan to give the states any authority in this, or will it be only driven by a federally appointed board?
With the SQ names, I think this process, what the secretary asked us to do, was to really accelerate the removal of these names and declare that name derogatory. The states certainly will have a say. If they don't like that name, they can submit a proposal back to the BGN. If there's community support, or just like any other proposal, if SQ Point gets changed to Crystal Point and the community around there and the State Names Authority wants to submit a proposal, they absolutely can to the BGN after the task force work is done. I see a few more hands.
Yeah. So am I right in assuming that the local municipalities have not been contacted, and sounds like that's coming down to the state committee? There's 11 in New York, have these communities that these features lie in been contacted at all?
No, we've not directly contacted the landowners apart from the direct tribes. We've gone that extra step, but our outreach mechanism has been through federal register notice, through media, through meeting with stakeholder groups like yours to try to get the word out. But being able to contact each individual landowner or the jurisdiction on which they apply, that's just, it wasn't part of this process.
Okay, thank you.
Question from North Carolina?
Yeah, we have that one that's not quite the SQ, it's star SQ star. So we didn't really flag that up when we first saw the notification, and now it's on the list. And my research and in talking to the Eastern Band folks, that one is probably needs to have a spelling revision rather than a name change. I guess that would still fall under that because it is a Cherokee word. It was just the original mappers, I think, just spelled it the way that they thought it should be spelled. So I'm guessing that we're probably going to put in a proposal to change the spelling of that to something that more is aligned with the original intent of the Cherokee term. But that'll probably come from the Eastern Band folks directly instead of from me, because it's just easier to go directly from them instead of through our board. But I don't know how many there are like that, but that's why we didn't flag any up when we first searched our database, because we just looked for the SQ star and not something in front of it. So
yeah.
But we would very much welcome that feedback. And in fact, I know the task force came across this one themselves, and I think recognized that it wasn't identical to the SQ term. But it's really great if we receive feedback, particularly from the tribe that this is associated with, or if it's on a tribal land, that lets us know what they would like. That helps the task force out, and that makes sure that they've got community involvement, and that it's a name that really the federal government, we don't want to be in the position of providing a name. We would love that to come from the community. That would be great if it's a spelling change or however you would like to handle that.
Yeah, I'll make sure that they're aware of that. A lot of times they don't, they get missed on a lot of those things because they're organizational, but I personally know the guys that do the water work there through my Clean Water Act jobs. So I will make sure they're aware of it.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. Yeah, absolutely. The National Park Service member on this task force noted that one as well. And I gather he's working with the local national park management also to address that particular word and see if there can't be a proposal to change it to the proper Cherokee spelling. So it sounds like everybody's approaching it from different angles with the same, hopefully same outcome. So yeah, good catch. Thank you.
See a hand up from Emily.
Yeah, the one place name that Maine has listed in that document, thank you for sending the link. That name has a change that I submitted or approved to submit to the BGN last November. Do you know if something is already in process for changing the place name as part of this?
Yeah, if the BGN has received the proposal, it should have been reflected in that spreadsheet. I see in this case it is not. Jenny, do you have any information about this one?
Well, yeah, if it wasn't a pending proposal before the BGN, then it would not be, essentially the cutoff date was January 24th. So if it didn't make it on the most recent quarterly review list, so I guess, Emily, maybe we should chat offline later and find out a little more detail from you about that particular word, that particular proposal, see where it stands. I see Matt.
Sorry.
Join.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. I lost the internet connection here. No, that one was one. It wasn't. Yeah, Emily, it wasn't a proposal, and I thought that we had discussed just having the BGN. It was an old decision that was made by the tribe. It's on tribal lands in Maine, and it was one that was part of the batch back in the early 2000s when the state had the legislation that changed them all, and somehow it didn't get submitted to the BGN, or for some other reason it didn't have the same support. I don't know the difference. I don't know. Yeah. So I thought that we could, just saying that, yeah, you support it, which obviously you would, since it's the name for the state and for the tribe as well, that we could just change it. But there was, Jenny and I talked about it, and I forget exactly why we didn't do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I was able to locate the file from the early 2000s, and even though the legislation was supposed to address all the SQ names in Maine, it seemed there were a few that slipped through the cracks at the time, never got addressed. I think they were supposed to reach out to each county and ask them for a replacement, and that county just didn't step forward. So it's still got the SQ name.
But
So I
it's
think-
on Penobscot tribal land, and they changed the name in 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And
sorry to
something,
put us on the
yeah.
spot here, but yeah,
Yeah,
we can follow up with you, Emily. So I'm sorry I didn't respond to let you know that we actually weren't processing the way I thought we could.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
And not to put Mike on the spot, but I will anyway. It might be worth talking about what about those features that are solely on tribal lands. One of the 4 working groups within the task force is looking at features on tribal lands, but I don't quite know what the outcome of that is yet. I guess for now, same process applies, replace the name, and if the tribe doesn't like it, they can submit something else. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, and in some cases, we know that the tribe has a different name for the feature on their land. I know at least 2, and I'm sure there are more than that. And I don't know, we don't know how policy, we haven't been, we don't know how policy 10 applies in this case. We're usually with the BGN, policy 10 says that if the tribe uses a name, they tell us and we update GNIS or whatever name they have, as long as it meets the other policies. Or no, I mean, I guess it can only derogatory. It can violate the community remains policy, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So to answer Jenny's question about a little bit more about how we're starting to review these names and are addressing them within the task force, we looked at those 665 names and divided them up into 4 working groups based mainly on the land ownership at the federal level. So we have names that are on BLM land, names that are on USDA land, names that are on other federal area land, Fish and Wildlife Service and Park Service primarily, and then names that are on tribal land. And we've got a few members of the task force assigned to each of those working groups. I've given the working group leads latitude to figure out, based on their experience working within their bureaus, how best to reconcile those names and come to review, or how to review those names. And our BIA representative to the BGN is leading the tribal working group, and she will be using her experience and her knowledge to figure out how to reconcile the names that are on tribal land.
Do we have any other questions?
All right, well, again, thank you for the invitation. The last comment I'll say is, don't consider this a one and done. And this is a process. I understand there's going to be some iteration, and there will be chances after the task force is done, or there's chances now through the public comment period for states or individuals or local jurisdictions to have their feelings heard. And those comments and recommendations will get prioritized. If we have a name from the public that comes in during these comment periods, we'll prioritize it above the list that we have now. After that, and we really would like to hear that. That makes us, it puts us in a better position, I think, from the federal perspective. Given that, after the process is all done, the task force submits the recommendations to the BGN renders a decision. That the existing process that before all the secretarial orders were signed, that's still there. The states or anybody else can submit a name change if they're not happy with the results or would like to offer a more fitting name. So there are many opportunities for the states or others to have a chance to have their voice heard. Okay, well, thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we really needed that overview. And I know that probably there's still more questions to be asked. And are we able to email questions directly to you, Mr. Tischler?
I prefer if you didn't. I might be the one answering them, but if you look in the Federal Register notice, there's a Dropbox for questions related to that. The Department of Interior has, particularly for media, they have inquiries. If it is about a proposal that maybe, like Emily, the one you had said was kind of in the queue already, I think that's fine to email Jenny about. But the Department of Interior and USGS are trying to handle how different inquiries come in. So I prefer that be the method, even if they eventually will probably trickle down to Jenny and I, but at least that way there's some tracking and awareness of the kind of questions that are being asked and answered.
Perfect. All right, thank you. All right, Sandy, I will turn it back to you.
Glenn, Jenny, Matt, is there anything else you want to say?
Not for me.
All right.
No, I think, this has been an awesome session, and again, great to sort of close that loop and at the same time open the door to meeting everybody. And I hope that the staff will continue to be here available to help with questions. And keep in mind that obviously this is the focus at the moment, as a hot topic, both in the media and at the Department of the Interior. And we're going to be really focused on this for the coming months, really until the BGN votes on those 665 some changes in September. But in the meantime, routine BGN work is ongoing. As Matt kind of hinted earlier, our apologies if routine inquiries and outreach kind of get put on the back burner for the near term. We do really rely on you guys. We do our best to share everything we get. But if you're working on a proposal and something is missing, or you have a question, hey, did you contact the county yet? Did they respond? If we've neglected to share that with you, we would like to have a much better a communication effort, a way to share the status of every proposal. But there's a fine line between sharing everything and making it public, and then you have, you call public or a privately identifiable information, we call PII. And given that proposals often include, obviously people's names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, birth and death dates, people submit tax records, social security numbers, why I do not know, but there's a fine line between sharing information that's relevant to the proposal versus what should be kept private. But obviously, if you need a proposal, if you're confused about the process, we're always available for one-on-one chats. If you have a small board or a committee, or even just you and a colleague, and would like Matt and I to join just to have a catch-up session. We do this a lot with the Western states, and especially the Western states now that are meeting virtually and have very formal meeting agendas. We've been able to join those and witness the discussions and the votes, and that is just an amazing opportunity. But just because you have one or two folks in your state and you're more informal, we're happy to join you. Happy to brief you ahead of time, catch up with you after the fact. We're just here to work with you. And what was it? Christine said, the new COGNA t-shirt, we're all in this together. So keep in touch. And
I'll have those made shortly.
Please do. Yes, I'll take a navy blue.
And just to piggyback on what Jenny just said, last year we had a name proposal come from a monastery. Isn't that right?
Right.
And so we had the opportunity to attend a Board of Supervisors meeting for that county. And we're there just in case they had any questions for us, but we were there. And it was interesting watching the discussions take place. So there is that too. I mean, so if you need them to be with you at a Board of Supervisors meeting electronically, they'll do it. Jenny will.
Right. Yeah.
All hours of the night and day.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. And for what it's worth, tomorrow, and some of you may have just seen through the media, Mount Evans, which is, fairly prominent peak outside Denver, has been proposed to be renamed. This is a classic example of, you've heard Mike briefly talk about derogatory versus offensive. And it might be worth keeping that distinction in mind. A word can be derogatory, and obviously the SQ word and the ones that the advisory committee are going to tackle, those are derogatory words. There's a whole other category of names that might be considered offensive, primarily because of the deeds of the person that the name honors. Nevada knows firsthand, if Jeff Davis Peak was renamed. Well, the words Jeff Davis are not inherently offensive, just as Mount Evans. Evans is not an offensive word, but it certainly represents a person, and their deeds could be considered offensive. And those of you in, obviously in the South, it's interesting that Jeff Davis changes so far have all been in California, Nevada, and Montana. There's been nothing from the eastern states. But anyway, or even a lot of the Confederate changes in general have been from the West. But anyway, so a name can be offensive. And so tomorrow, the Clear Creek County, Colorado Board of Supervisors is meeting to hear there's 5 different proposals pending right now to change Mount Evans. Of course, the first question will be, should the name be changed at all? And if the answer is yes, what's the best replacement? But they've had a lot of public interest. There's been tribal meetings. The tribes are going to attend tomorrow, and each of the 5 proponents are going to attend tomorrow to present their individual case as to why they think their name is the best one as a replacement. So it's going to be interesting. So Sandy's right. Sometimes we do get to also attend county board meetings, and those can be fascinating. There was one in Pennsylvania. They have a SQ run, and they an hour and a half. They debated the merits of the change and the 2 townships involved, and oh, the gosh, they really got into detail. So it can be fascinating to see the local government discussions too. So you guys are kind of the intermediary between the locals and the feds. So we need you to get involved, and if nothing else, just Google geographic names from time to time, see what's happening in your state. So thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Christine.
Or we just also wanted, before we leave for the day, we just also wanted to reiterate that we will be having an in-person meeting as of right now. As we all know, things can change on a dime in this world right now, but as of right now, we are planning to meet in Maryland after Labor Day, not Labor Day week, but after Labor Day. And Jen is going to be the coordinator for that program. What I would recommend is that you guys pay attention to some emails that may be coming. We will be requesting a submission for academic papers. And there'll be guidelines for what those academic papers should be about. But if you need a reason to attend a meeting, presenting an academic paper might be a very good reason to present to your state. Or if there is a round or a discussion session that you want to put together with the 3 or 4 other people, please consider that and get into contact, I guess, with Christine.
Yeah, we'll be working as on a subcommittee to organize the agenda for the upcoming meeting. But thanks for mentioning all that, because I think for those that haven't been to the meeting in the past, in a weird way, I kind of associate it with my first experience of like, wait, what? We were supposed to be here the whole time? Because every state actually does get a vote in the COGNA business meeting, and we go over, the organization and, where do we want the next conference to be? Things like this. We actually have had 3 very brave souls volunteer. Jen, I couldn't be more grateful for your bravery in starting our first post-COVID in-person conference. And then Bruce in Oregon is going to host in 23, and Chris Barnett in Missouri is going to host in 2024. And there really is a benefit. I mean, we're going to try really hard to incorporate the virtual component into the forthcoming meetings. We're not sure how to manage that, but we're going to try, because the format of the conferences is such that we're not sure how to be effective for people to be able to be virtual and be able to hear everything in the discussions. But we're still in discussion on that. But COGNA historically has been a multi-day conference. One of the things we want to incorporate into it is the concept of certification, because if you can come to this conference and come away with that you are certified for the annual information that's presented, that you attended a US board meeting as a result, you saw what happens, you understand the process. Couple states in the past said if there was some kind of certification, they could justify attendance. So we're trying to build that. If we can build the digital component, I think that will help our faraway states like Alaska and Hawaii that might not be able to attend if it's on the East Coast, and possibly now some of the territories that might be dealing with the same thing. They're our friends too. So we want to be as helpful to any of our name agencies as we can. But going to the conference has been extraordinarily helpful, just for, as Sandy mentioned in the beginning, the networking. And sometimes a lot of information is shared above and beyond just the 8 to 5. It's the after hours and really sitting and hashing out what your particular problem is. And I couldn't be more grateful for the support that I've gotten through COGNA over the last 5 or 6 years. And I feel like you will find that as well if you attend one of the meetings. So that's my plug. Sorry, Sandy.
And last but not least, if you found this so interesting and fascinating and you want to hear more about this, there's one more regional meeting tomorrow. Central Standard Time. If you would love to attend, you can send me an email and then I'll forward it to Christine and then she can send to you the Zoom link.
Yeah, Chris hasn't sent out his newest agenda. He had to update it to agendize Mr. Tischler, but we will get that today. I've already been emailing Chris and we'll have that. It's tomorrow from, I believe it's 1 to 3 Central Time.
So for us East Coasters, that would be 2 to 4. So, yes.
A chance to meet more states.
Yes, and I told the Pacific people if they ever host a meeting from 3 o'clock, that would be great because I'll just be at home in my sweats watching from 6 to 9. So anyway,
well, you can join the Hawaii board meets. They meet at 2:30 p.m. Hawaii time, so it starts at 7:30 p.m. my time, and then many times we've gone past 10 o'clock. So it's upon me 24/7. That's okay. And actually, I joined another call with, in addition to domestic names, we also support the Antarctic names activity. And so my favorite yet is a meeting we had with the folks from the New Zealand and Australia and Belgian names authorities. And it was at 1:30 a.m. my time. So, 3 p.m. is easy. But I will add too, and I'm going to put COGNA on the spot again. My task today, I guess, is I just thinking coming out of this, if anyone in these 4 sessions, these last couple of weeks, and again tomorrow, I don't know if you feel like there's a need for a dedicated session of a subset of COGNA or a chance for you to interact with other states that aren't in your particular region, but you'd like to just talk about a particular topic. Nothing may not be anything to do with offensive names. Maybe there's something else about COGNA or the way you solicit local input or the way you communicate what's going on in your state names activity. I'm going to again put Christine on the spot and suggest that it might be, helpful to have a session about, again, a particular focus topic. Ideally, it would happen at the in-person conference, but we realize, and we've known forever that, the chance of state employees getting out of your state on official travel is very, very difficult. So, we get the fact that, even though we were hyping up Maryland, there's no guarantee you'll get there. So in the meantime, I would like to think that COGNA is a year-round service, not just a once-a-year conference. And I think these sessions have really proved that. So again, just something to think about, if you want to just talk to 6 or 7 other states about, again, local input. And some of them do have websites. I mentioned earlier the link off our page. If you want to develop your own website, even if it's just a short little sentence that says you are the State Names Authority and you work with the BGN, you feel free to steal some of their wording and design. I'm sure they won't mind. So again, we're here all year long to work with you. So there you go, Christine. Like nothing else to do all day.
Yeah, no, and that's truly, we COGNA's been out there. I think part of the history Sandy might have mentioned in the beginning was it began as the Western States Association, and then there was need early on to develop it and grow it. And the fact that the website is COGNA 50, it's to unite all of us. And if we can each be helpful to one another, I mean, Sandy fully admitted to stealing from New York. That's fabulous. We steal from Washington State. It's great. That's what we need to do, because if you don't have, and actually, as a great example, the Nevada website was a bogarted page from one of the departments on the UNR campus that had a representative serving on our board in the past, and he retired, and it was one of those, oh no, what do we do? How do we deal with the website kind of thing? And then in looking at it and with understanding new regulations for university ADA access, things like this, we realized we have to completely redevelop our website. Our website right now was like 2 sad little pages that have been static for decades, and oh no, who's going to handle it? We're an unfunded board. So we have a lot of this going on and trying to figure out who's going to manage the website. So the University of Nevada, Reno is going to take it and completely overhaul it, make it ADA compliant. We're going to make it interactive so that people could put in a name suggestion on our website, and just again, for transparency and hopefully to drive public comment, because we are such a big state. And we're having difficulty getting the word out. So we're using, we liked what Washington was doing. So it's just an example. Jenny's suggesting Colorado for their public forum. So this is a way to communicate. Again, check out COGNA's website, update me with any changes that you want made to the contact list. We hope we don't have people's home addresses, but let's firm that up. And also, I think it was New York who said early on that inability to come to the meetings because of no funding and things like this. I had the same exact thing, and I'm just going to counter that with, I decided to pay for it myself, mostly because I wanted to go somewhere. So great excuse. But I decided once I came to the first couple meetings, this is going to be my personal vacation every year, because just the toponymic tours that people have put together are just, you're on vacation. So it's a great opportunity. If some of the states that are hosting you've never been to, it's another way to think of it. Maybe use your part of your 2-week vacation annually to go. It might be fun. So just something to think about.
I think that's it then. I thank everyone for coming. Hope you have a good Monday and a good rest of your work week.
Thank you, Sandy, for hosting this, and nice to meet everybody.
Thank you for hosting. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.